Good morning.
You're wrong.
Good morning.
That's objectively false. I have won the debate.
Okay. Do you want to start? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, first we should say what the topics are.
That's true.
So
well, the first one is racism in the criminal justice system.
yeah.
I believe, whether it's racist or systemically racist, or if it's not. Right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. And the second one is trans issues, specifically the recent Supreme Court decision.
Yes.
Which decided that it is unconstitutional to fire someone for being trans or for any gender identity.
Yes. Hold on. Okay.
There we go. And the third issue is drug decriminalization.
Yes. Okay, we got the 3 topics down.
Yeah. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Shareyah. I'm surprisingly not on the side that everyone thinks I should be on right now. I don't think America is systemically racist, and I think Black Lives Matter is a hoax. So I will just be proving why it is a hoax.
All right. I am Yarden. I am on the side of Black Lives Matter, and I am here to just demonstrate the totality of academic consensus on the criminal justice system that shows that it is racially biased against Black people.
Okay, you start.
All right.
Well, let's start with like, because we'll work our way up. So let's start with police, because one of the main goals for Black Lives Matter is defunding the police. So explain how defunding the police is gonna work in favor of saving more Black lives, and why Black Lives Matter is so focused on defunding the police.
Well, we're not discussing that. We're discussing whether or not the system is racist, right?
Well, yeah, by the system I meant, like, because part of the system is police, and everyone, that's my main issue with it, is that everyone thinks that, like, police are inherently racist because the videos that go around George Floyd, they think it's inherently racist. So I'm assuming that's what you believe, right? Because that's what.
How about I just give my opening statement?
Yeah. Okay.
So when we discuss racism in the United States, it can often be very confusing because different people have different definitions for what racism is. Generally, people don't think that there's explicit racism in the criminal justice system. You know, there's no law that says, like, Black people get this amount of time in prison, white people get this amount of time. It's generally the fact that the sum of individual biases leads to a racist system against Black people. It's not just that white people are biased against Black people. It's that the system as a whole is biased against Black people. So in reality, what this means is that when accounting for all their factors, including but not limited to past convictions and severity of crime, Black people are more likely to be sentenced to prison for a drug offense, more likely to be stopped and searched, more likely to be found guilty for a crime. They get longer sentences. They're more likely to be given the death penalty, and they're more likely to be given mandatory minimum sentences. There's plenty more, and I have studies to back all of these up.
Hold on, Sandra's FaceTiming me. What do I do?
A decline.
Okay.
We don't really need her.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. So the plurality of sociological and criminological evidence agrees on this. So yeah, that's my opening.
On the consensus that more Black people. So we're talking about.
So when you account for things like what the fact that Black people commit more crime, past arrests, all those other things. Even when you account for those other things and you just get it down to the base level of just skin color, Black people are on average more likely to get all of those things.
So it accounts for every single factor. You already said it accounts for past criminal convictions, all of that. Did it do that was a study, or that was a...
I have many studies.
So do all those studies account for, because the Department of Criminal Justice put out that there's no feasible way of accounting for each conviction, because each conviction has multiple different factors that don't just account for past criminal convictions. It accounts for, you have to account for every single factor, but that's a case-by-case basis. That's impossible to determine based on just the color of your skin. So in other words, you can't really say that.
It's literally impossible to get every single possible factor, right? Like, you can't possibly account for just skin color. Like, it's physically impossible. But when the plurality of data consistently comes out showing that there's a clear bias, not just in like individual states, but nationally in the criminal justice system against Black people, then I think it shows a clear pattern. If you want to,
yeah, go on.
So I can send you a study right now. This one analyzes data from around the country. I'll send it to the chat. It found that Black people on average get 20% longer sentences when accounting for all other factors. The thing is, we aren't the people who dedicate their lives to like studying these things. They're not going to leave out something as basic as like, oh, well, Black people commit more crime. They're not going to like leave.
That makes sense. It's just the issue is that there is no way that you can prove that, like, you can't physically prove that, oh, this guy got more of a sentence because he's Black or he's white. And even, yes, it shows that more Black people get, actually, I don't even, because I have a multitude of studies here dating as back as 1983, and then the studies go upwards from there until 2017, including a 3-year study that showed that there is no racial bias in sentencing patterns, because that's accounting for, what does it say? That's accounting for, so like that's accounting for.
Would you like to send it?
Yeah.
I have. If you want me to send, here I have a more. Here I have a more. I have a more comprehensive study here that showed that it analyzes 100 million traffic stops conducted across America, and it finds that the bar for searching Black and Hispanic drivers is significantly lower than the bar for white drivers. And additionally, the disparity between the amount of times that white people get searched and the amount of time that Black people get searched goes down after sunset, revealing that people just they base whether or not they're going to search the car based off of the skin color of the driver. So
for that, the pulling over, because I'll address that first. The pulling over, the DOJ Department of Justice. Yeah, DOJ found that Black people were, because they did a study on whether, because they realized that Black people were getting pulled over more often. So they did a study on whether, like, why they were getting pulled over, whether it was racial injustice or whether it was another factor. And they found that Black people were 25 to 30% more likely to be speeding than white people in general. So when you, like, yeah, they're getting pulled over more, but that's also because they're statistically more likely to be speeding in a car.
I mean, even though Black people are more, so this is like the same thing as Black people they commit more crime, therefore we should arrest like more Black people to make sure that it's proportional based off of race. But that doesn't make sense when you consider the fact that if you really want to arrest like everyone and make sure that no one commits crime, the group you would want to arrest isn't black people. It's men and people between the ages of 18 and 34. If you arrest every man between the ages of 18 to 34, regardless of race, you eliminate like 95% of crime. So that's just not a good way to address systemic racism. Just to arrest more black people.
I know, no, because that's the thing. If you, you're right. If you arrest the men between the ages of 18 to 34, you would have significantly less crime. And America does do that. The prison population in America is literally 95% men. Does that mean America's freaking sexist? No, it doesn't. It means just men commit more crime. So therefore,
I would argue that there is bias in the criminal justice system against men.
There is, but statistically, men are also significantly, not just a little, but significantly higher.
You agree that there's a bias in the criminal justice system against men, but not against black people?
No, I agree that I'm agreeing that there's not a decent. I think there's a slight amount of bias in every single position of power. There's bias in everything. I think everyone.
So you're conceding this argument?
No, I'm saying, because you're saying that America's systemically racist. Black people have no way of getting out of the hole.
That's not what systemic racism means. Systemic racism doesn't mean that if you're a black person, there's no way for you to avoid the wrath of America, and you're just gonna get arrested no matter what. It means that on average, black people are more likely than white people to face things like stop and frisk, to face things like harsher sentences, like the death penalty, like mandatory minimums. We haven't even gotten to any of the court things. We're just talking about the police, which isn't as strong there isn't as strong of evidence that police are biased than there are that the courts are biased.
So that's my issue, because you're saying that, but then that's literally what Black Lives Matter stands for, is that, police are all systemically racist. ACAB, do you believe in ACAB? That's one of the examples.
It depends on what your interpretation of ACAB is.
Well, my interpretation isn't that all cops are bad, because that's what I've been told that it's not. I've been told that all cops are bastards, meaning that the cops work for a corrupt system, therefore all cops are bastards. Is that, can we agree?
I think there's generally truth to that statement, but I wouldn't say that it's because they're systemically racist. I would make it because that would be like a leftist argument, they defend property rights, so there's no way to meaningfully address systemic changes without changing police. But that's a totally different thing. That's I don't think when people are protesting the police because there's no accountability in the system, and that's not even what we're trying to discuss here. We're just trying to discuss whether or not there's a bias, right? Not whether or not there's accountability.
Yeah, well, in the criminal justice system, right?
Yeah, the criminal justice system doesn't just include police. It includes.
Yes, I know exactly, but how do
I'm not here to white knight for the BLM movement. I'm here to point out the statistical evidence that there is bias against the black people in the criminal justice system. Could you address what I said earlier about the study with 100 million traffic stops that showed that the disparity between black drivers and white drivers went down after sunset? Could you provide an explanation as to why that is?
Can you repeat that study? What happened is that what happened in the study that?
Yeah, so it found that the difference between the amount of black people that were getting pulled over and the amount of white people that were getting pulled over went down. It was about even after sunset, indicating that the police officers were profiling black and Hispanic people.
So more people were pulled over in the morning.
In the morning.
More black people, as in more black people.
Yeah.
Well, black people.
Yeah, compared to white people, on average. Yeah. I also have a study which had a mock trial of intro-level law students, and it found that the students were more. It showed pictures of suspects and it had a list of the crimes that they did and like the possible evidence for the crime, and it found that on average the juries were more likely to see criminality in Black people than white people. And these weren't real people that they were analyzing. These were mock juries.
So
I could say
sorry, what? Do you have the race of the people who were identifying the
Yeah. So it also found that it didn't matter what race the people were.
Oh, you're sure.
Both Black people and white people were biased against Black people. It's an implicit thing.
Yes, so I'm not denying that there's not implicit bias. I'm not denying that all of us don't have some sort of implicit bias within us. I'm also not saying you can't prove that everyone has an implicit bias towards Black people. Like, you can't say that, oh, just because like something happened against a Black person because of a white person, that's racist. You can't say that every single person has implicit bias against Black people either. So you have to look at what else is causing Black people to do this stuff, and in turn causing more rates of criminality in the justice system for Black people.
So the argument isn't that everyone has implicit biases. It's that, or that, you know, when a Black person gets like sentenced to jail for like murdering someone, they're not saying like that's an example of systemic racism. Just on the whole, Black people are more likely to get longer sentences than white people for the same crime with the same background information and the same like past convictions. This is an average. This isn't like every single person in the criminal justice system hates Black people, or even like most people do. It's just the sum of all individual biases. You even admit it yourself. Everyone has implicit biases. The sum of the biases, when we generally have a vision of Black people, even if whether we want to or not, that they tend to be more violent or big or older. There is evidence to suggest that everyone, not just white people, is more likely to view Black people as older than white people, even if it's like a picture of two people that are the same age. Here, I have a study for that.
Okay, so the other study where you said the conviction, that is where we get contradicting evidence, is because there's multiple studies against that Black people aren't convicted and they get lesser conviction rates, including a study at Center for Equal Opportunity done by a former University of Maryland professor. He found that arrested Black people get sent to prison at lower rates than arrested white people in just about every category that the government measures. And he also found that Black people are twice as likely to get off on rape charges, around 50% more likely to escape punishment when charged with simple assault, and a third more likely to beat the rap on drug dealing. The difference in favor of Black offenders existed in 12 out of the 14 categories of crime. So the exception was traffic felonies and the miscellaneous offenses that you can't really measure. So, and then another study, a 3-year analysis of California, the researcher who thought there was racism in the criminal justice system, after she went over the research and looked at all the possible variables, she couldn't even measure it, but she looked at every single possible variable that she didn't mention in her previous study, that she found that there was there was racial bias in the criminal justice system. She found that the severity of the offender's sentences depended heavily on such factors as prior criminal record, the seriousness of the crime, whether guns were used in the commission of those crimes, and race was found to have no effect in the fact that researchers and in fact, the researcher was forced to admit that these results contradicted conclusions that she had drawn in an earlier study that she did, where she didn't take all prior convictions and the use of all the factors into account. And a Black person facing a jury is more likely to get an acquittal than a white person.
Yeah, so could you send one of those?
I might,
I think
because
you
I can
listed like
cite
3
them by
studies.
mouth, but like I don't have, because this is on a separate computer. Like I could cite so this was done by a researcher, Joan P. Joan P. If you just look up 3-year analysis of 11,000 convicted criminals.
Analysis of what convicted criminals?
Convicted, just convicted criminals. Whoever was convicted. And dating us back to 1983,
I can't find it. It didn't show up on Google.
Did you look up state of California?
State of California. Oh yeah, also the call is full, so no more people can join.
What?
The call is full, so no more people can join.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I looked up 3-year analysis of convicted criminals, state of California.
Show up by Joan
Nothing.
P.
Joan P.
Should have gotten more of a name.
Yeah, I don't have it. But I never got your explanation for why the disparity between the amount of white people and black people getting pulled over went down as it became darker.
Well, did your study account
and you couldn't
for
see the skin color?
What?
And you couldn't see the skin color.
So your study proved that it was because, like, solely because they couldn't see the skin color. Because you can't say that because the sun went down, you can't see the skin color, like, automatically, oh, that must be because freaking I can't see the black person, so I can't pull him over. Like, you need to, like...
I mean, what other variable could it... What other reason could it be?
Well, where was the study done? Across America? Cause
yeah, it was across America. It was 100 million traffic stops.
So how can you prove that it was because of the skin color? Just because the sunset went down, you can't see the person inside? Or I can't, like, did the study prove that it was without a doubt, without an unreasonable doubt, that this is because...
I mean, I think you're holding it to way high of a standard.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying, because you can't say that the entire justice system is rigged against black people and not account...
Well, no, this is just one example. I can send more studies. I've held back on my study sending.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't want to read off all the studies, but, like, because I feel like at one point the studies start to contradict one another. That's why I can't really trust any study, because I feel like both studies find very different findings.
Well, I mean, it depends on the study. Some studies are way more comprehensive than other studies.
That's true.
Generally, the studies about courts go around the entire country, because, like, court systems, they tend to not be very localized, while police systems are very localized. They go by town. So that's why
the county.
Yeah. I mean, all of the studies I have for the court system go around the entire country. They're pretty comprehensive. They find like pretty unilaterally that black people get longer sentences than white people for the same things, for the same crimes.
Oh yeah, but, like, I could say that I have, like, I think 10 in front of me that say the opposite, and this is from, like, dating all the way back from 1983 again to today. And if they're finding consecutive numbers of non-racial bias or no, like, there was a study where it said there's a meager amount of racial bias, but not enough to make the whole system corrupt. And that was in 1991. So again, like, the issue is that because I have like I was on the side that you were on. So yeah, there were studies on that side too, but at one point, if both studies are contradicting themselves, like I've read, like it's crazy because it's like you can go through pages and pages of paper and like they can be as comprehensive as you want, and each study is going to find something different because each study has very different variables going into it. So at that point, you just have to look at what is, you have to look at like, I don't even know, like, because I can't explain the
Did you know that
studies.
White and Black Americans admit to using and selling illicit drugs at similar rates, but Black people are vastly more likely to go to prison for a drug offense?
Yeah. Black people are also statistically more likely to deal drugs because they do. I agree. They deal the same. I'm like, people in Fairlawn probably definitely deal the same amount of drugs than people in freaking Newark or Patterson. The difference is that people in low income communities, majority Black people, tend to deal drugs outside in the outdoors, whereas people in white communities or higher income communities deal drugs indoors within their families, friends, or acquaintances. So like that could account, because if you're dealing drugs outside, of course you're gonna freaking get caught dealing drugs outside or doing drugs outside.
I mean, do you have any data on like how often Black people deal drugs like on the outside versus like white people?
No, they're just statistically more likely to deal drugs outside, whereas white people.
Yeah, statistically more likely is one thing, but 3.7 times as likely to be arrested. Like,
well, yeah, and then yes, again, that's one factor. Then you have to count that there's more police in those areas because there's more.
That's another thing. That's another thing. Black communities are way over policed as compared to white communities, even though increasing the amount of police presence in a neighborhood doesn't show or doesn't decrease the amount of crime that there is, but it does increase the amount of crime.
Where'd you find that? I don't know what statistic showed you that not increasing the police presence in a community decreases crime, or
no, it doesn't necessarily say that it decreases crime, just that it doesn't increase, or that having more police in the community doesn't necessarily decrease crime.
Can you read the study or whatever it was, a statistic? What was it?
Sure. Here, let me find.
Because does that even logically make sense? I don't know if that even logically makes sense.
That increasing the amount of police presence doesn't necessarily decrease crime?
Yes, that doesn't logically make sense. How does, so you take, for example...
Because there's a number of reasons. So first of all, increasing the punishment or like the chances that you get punished for a crime doesn't necessarily act as a deterrent for people who like live in neighborhoods that have high amounts of crime already. Also, police militarization decreases public trust in police.
Yes.
Which can contribute to increases in crime.
Yeah. So police militarization, I agree with that. The issue is that you just said that increasing police presence doesn't necessarily decrease crime, so it stays stagnant.
There's just not statistics. Have you taken stats?
No.
Okay, so there's a difference between saying that doing something causes something to decrease versus saying it doesn't necessarily cause it to increase. So if I were to say, like, putting your hand sanitizer on causes or decreases your likelihood of getting sick, that's a very different from saying putting on hand sanitizer doesn't necessarily increase your chance of getting sick.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So increasing police in an area doesn't necessarily lead to crime. It changes drastically depending on the situation in which they are put into an area. While it doesn't necessarily decrease crime, it does increase the amount of people that get arrested. It also decreases the amount of public trust. So what it mainly does is it just destabilizes neighborhoods.
So those people getting arrested weren't committing a crime, they just got arrested because they just got arrested.
No, they were committing a crime.
So how? Okay, so
the amount of crime, like with more police versus with less police, is around the same. However, with more police, they're just getting arrested for it.
So I'm sorry, can you repeat that? That just completely went through my brain.
So imagine like a ghetto, like in like inner city New York, right? In 2014, with no police there, imagine. The crime rate is 10%. And the arrest rate is 5%. When you increase the amount of police there, the crime rate is still 10%. However, the arrest rate goes up. The amount of crime didn't really change.
So, okay, So first of all, can you explain why murder was literally cut in half since the 1990s, since the police budget has substantially increased and more police have been substantially increasing throughout the past 2 decades? Can you explain why violent crime has been substantially cut and drug offenses have also been substantially down, and we are at the lowest rate of crime in the past 2 decades?
Yeah, so since the 1990s was the decade in which we had the highest level of crime in this nation's history. Ever since then, crime has gone down significantly all across the board around the country, and also in countries in Europe too. There isn't a lot of evidence to suggest that this is because of increased police budgets. Even though it has correlated with that, there isn't evidence to suggest that it caused it.
So you can disprove that by when like all these viral videos that like the police brutality cases that go off. And so I'll give you an example. Ferguson, what happened in Ferguson in 2014 or 2015, I think. Whatever happened in
I don't know.
The Brown case, Michael Brown.
Michael Brown, yeah.
Yeah. So after that, police actually stopped what is that called? Policing as much? Not like stopped actively policing. They stopped actively policing.
They stopped doing proactive policing?
What?
They stopped doing proactive policing?
Yes. They stopped proactively policing. And from January to June of 2015, as stop and frisk rates dropped 42%, murder skyrocketed 19.5%, and shootings increased 9%. And in a study, and then using the New York Police Department stop and frisk data, blacks were 53% of those pulled over, despite being 23% of the population of the city's population. Whites were 9% of those stopped, and even though they were 35% of the population, that would indicate racism. Except that blacks were 66% of violent crime suspects. Blacks and Hispanics are suspects of 98% of all shootings in the city, and whites comprised of 5% of violent crime suspects, meaning that police were statistically under-targeting minorities in New York City.
Well, they were under-targeting based off of their level of criminality, but they weren't.
Yeah,
they weren't under-targeting.
Well, yes. Okay, so yeah, so
I'm of the opinion that you shouldn't be targeting people based off of race, right? You shouldn't be trying to police people proportional to the level of crime they commit, because that's only going to increase the disparity between the races of how much you report the crime, right? If you police more black neighborhoods because you have data that shows that they commit more crime, you're going to arrest even more black people, and then the amount of crime that gets reported for them is going to go up because you policed them more. And then it just increases the cycle.
So with that, that doesn't make sense, because they don't go based, that's a black community, like let's go put police there. They don't do that. They do. They go
based off. They absolutely do.
they go based off because lower income communities commit more crime. That's
Yeah, and lower income communities tend to be more black.
More black, yes. So that isn't based off of their race. That's based off of their economic, which leads to increased crime. So you can't say, oh, like more police are in this area because black people are in this area. It's more police are in this area because black people, because it's a lower income area.
Oh, no, they would say like, yeah, this area has more crime rates, so we're going to go with this. Yeah, it might not necessarily be because they're black, but it still is a problem that over policing does lead to increased like reported crime.
Well, yes, but so you would be okay with, let's say, because Newark has a high minority population, whereas Fair Lawn has a high white Jewish population. Newark and Fair Lawn aren't very equivalent in their violent crime rates. But just to prove your point, you would put equal amounts of police in both of these areas just to show, like, you know what, equality for all. They don't need as many police, because there's a lot more police officers in Newark than there are in New Jersey. Just to prove, in Fair Lawn. Just to prove your point that, there's no reason for that many police officers to be in Newark. Now you're just going to increase the rate of violent crime because there's less police officers in that town. So I'm confused as to. Yeah,
so I would police both of the neighborhoods proportionally based off of what their populations. Yeah.
Rather than their crime rates.
Yeah. Because the more you police them, the higher the crime rate's going to look. So it's going to seem like Newark is worse than it actually is. But I don't think that comparing different cities is what we should do. I think we should compare different neighborhoods within a city, like Brooklyn compared to the Bronx. I don't think we should compare Newark to Fair Lawn. There's a multitude of reasons as to why Fair Lawn could choose a specific police budget. We're a very suburban area, not nearly as dense as a place like Newark. It's not just. I would if you want to discuss like different neighborhoods within Newark, of which I'm not really that informed about Newark. Then yeah, but I don't feel comfortable comparing Fair Lawn to Newark.
Well, because, no, I'm giving an example because it doesn't matter. Like, even if Fair Lawn was an all black community, and even if Newark was an all white community, it wouldn't matter because the rates of crime are higher in Newark. So of course you're going to put more police in Newark, where it's more dangerous because there's more crime there. And it's not just like, I agree with the whole drug issue because I think it's unfair that
I'm not convinced that increasing the amount of police that are in an area will decrease the amount of crime. So I wouldn't necessarily put more police in Newark, like relative to the population. Maybe you could because they're a more dense city, but yeah, I think we should probably move on to the trans issues at this point.
Okay.
Yes. Do you want to do your first? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the United States, there are special classes as established in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So just as you can't discriminate based on race, you also can't discriminate based off of sexual orientation, and most importantly for this discussion, sex. The Supreme Court decision reaffirmed that discriminating against someone on the basis of being trans is a violation of this act, as it would be on the basis of sex. So in my opinion, even if you disagree with the Supreme Court decision, I philosophically believe that gender identity should be a protected class like race. And the reason why we have protected classes is because if we allow people to discriminate on the basis of these things, it'll inevitably lead to more persecution of already marginalized groups. In my opinion, the Civil Rights Act was necessary for ending segregation. And so the law only applies to getting fired. So we should focus on that.
Yeah. So my only issue with that is I'm perfectly fine with like not discriminating, and personally I wouldn't do that. But the issue I have is now you're taking religious freedom, now you're taking the First Amendment away from people. Like, let's say, for example, the mosque down the street, and someone who worked there is now transgender, now identifies himself as transgender. My issue is that mosque doesn't believe that like he doesn't believe like that's not their personal, they don't believe that it's against their religion, that transgender is against their religion. So my issue with it is that now this mosque is forced to employ this employee, keep this employee employed, even though it goes against their own religious belief. So at that point it's just like,
so I think everyone should be free to follow their own religious beliefs. That's perfectly fine, up until the point where it becomes discriminatory. So at that point, I would say, fuck those people. They should be allowed to. They should, they shouldn't force the trans person not to go to their mosque.
It's not. Well, it's not forced not to go to the mosque. It's to be employed, because we're talking about firing,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Like this is the same argument as like the baking the cake for the gay couple. I think I don't care if your religious belief says that like you're not allowed to serve gay people. Like, what if your religious belief said that like you have to kill black people? I don't think that you should be able to. I don't think you should be able to hide behind your religious beliefs to be able to do whatever you want. Some people's rights are more important than others.
So, but the First Amendment literally defends your First Amendment right to you can believe whatever you want. I can believe whatever, but the issue is that now you're infringing on their First Amendment right to literally religious freedom. And now you're saying, you know what, screw your religion. I don't believe it. So screw it. Like, I don't think that's personally, like, I don't care about that religion.
If my religion said that, like, I have to threaten to kill black people and, so I do that.
That's violent. That's okay, but that's the difference. It's a violent.
Yeah. So under the Supreme Court Act, it says that you can't discriminate based off of these certain things, and gender identity is one of them. So.
Yes, but there's no religion.
So that overrides the religious freedom to discriminate. We can't have unlimited rights. We have to prioritize some rights over others. And we've decided in the United States that the rights of people to not get fired for being who they are is more important than other people's rights to discriminate.
To religious freedom. Yeah. So then like, if the government has the power to go against your own, whatever you think is right, go against your First Amendment right to your religious freedom, they also have the right to go against you and me and say, look, you can't get married because you're gay, because we don't want to do that. So that's the issue, is now you're giving the government the power to say, look, we can take away your religious freedom anytime we want, just like we can take away everything else. So
what if your religious freedom is to discriminate against black people? You'd make the same argument. Giving the government the power to do anything doesn't mean that we're giving the government the power to do everything.
Right? Okay, so if the mosque had whatever religion you're saying has the basis of, I'm going to discriminate based off of your black, they can have their own religions to do that. You can do, like, why would you, if you're black, go to another religion? You could do something else.
I don't know why they would, but they should have the right to, of course.
Yes.
No, we're not talking about like going to the mosque. We're talking about being employed. Yeah, like if I wanted to work for that homophobic like baker, like I wouldn't want to, but I should be allowed to. They should be able to fire me because I'm a terrible chef, not because I'm gay.
So I get the whole. Well, that's the issue, is that now you're allowing for the infringement on your First Amendment right. If the government can infringe your First Amendment right to religious freedom, I don't want to employ this gay person because it goes against my religion. You're now giving the government the power to freaking do whatever. And on top of that, if you have such a problem with that discriminatory baker, that discriminatory mosque, whatever, if you have a problem with that, you're allowed to not give your services to them. So now, if enough people go against that whole ideology, if enough people are like, yo, I'm not going to go to this baker that freaking discriminated against gay people, they're going to go out of business. That's literally how capitalism works, is they're going to go out of business because no one wants to go to a discriminatory baker. They'd rather go to the baker down the street who doesn't discriminate against gay people. But the main point is that in America, everyone has the freedom to do whatever they want. Even the freaking KKK have the freedom to do whatever they want. As long as they're not hurting anyone else, as long as they're not freaking, hurting anyone else. You have the freedom to do whatever you want. As long as you're not bothering anyone else, as long as you're not forcing your own ideals on anyone else, then you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And that's the biggest thing about America, is that you should have the freedom to do whatever you want.
All right. So you had 2 points there. The first one is that like if you allow the government to pick who gets to be discriminated against, the government can do like anything, right?
Well, yeah. Now you're just pretty much giving the power to government.
I mean, like if you give the government to like make slavery illegal, you give the government like the right to make breathing illegal. Like it's a complete non sequitur. You can't have unlimited rights in a like no matter what. My right to kill you is less important than your right to live, right?
Yes.
So in the case of this, my right to work for whoever I want, like, you know, assuming that I'm qualified, is more important than a person's right to fire me for on the basis of something that I didn't choose, right?
On the basis of religious freedom, on the basis of the First Amendment, right? So that's the issue, because you're saying it's like the basis of.
Is it a violation of? Answer this question: is it a violation of the First Amendment for to force people to hire black people?
Yes. Yes, that's why I think affirmative action is racist.
Wait, because that's not affirmative. No. You think that people should be allowed to fire other people on the basis of race? Like if you want to fire someone because they're black, you think that should be allowed?
Yeah.
Okay, see, I disagree, because when you do that, you inevitably we're distancing away from a philosophical argument. We're going more towards a practical argument. When you practically allow people to be discriminated against on basis of things like race and gender, you inevitably create a situation where already marginalized groups get even more marginalized. We want to create a society which works for everyone, and I think that the right of people to get fired, or right of people to not get fired for being gay or being black, is more important than your supposed right to discriminate. Like the people would make the same argument against like ending segregation in the 1960s. People would say, oh, you know, I should be allowed to not serve black people, and segregation just wouldn't have ended unless we enforced it. It's just not possible. And also, you said that you also made another point about how you can just vote with your wallet. You made the vote with your wallet argument. If you don't like it, you can just go somewhere else. That isn't always an option. In the 1960s, black people couldn't just go to wherever they wanted, right? People didn't boycott segregationist businesses because they were racist. They loved it. It had to be enforced by the government.
Yeah, but we're not talking about 1960s. We're talking about today, whether religious discrimination is happening, which it is. If you're forcing someone to go against their religious beliefs, you are violating their First Amendment. That's what the argument is, right? You're forcing someone to go against their religious beliefs, and just as easily as you can make someone go against their religious beliefs, the government can make you go against your own beliefs. So that's the issue I have. Is once you have the freedom, like, yes, I said vote with your wallet. Vote with your wallet. I meant, like, if big corporations did this, literally today, if big corporations did this, if a big corporation, let's say Toys R Us, was like, we're not hiring trans people, we're going to freaking fire all the trans people that work for us, whatever, it would go bankrupt. It would, if it already did, but it would go bankrupt again.
I don't think that's an argument in your favor. I don't think that just because if we were to allow I don't think the vote with your wallet argument is something that like proves that we should be allowing people to discriminate. Because I mean, we could easily end up in a situation just like how we did in the 1960s. We could easily like right now, it's still illegal. It's still legal for trans people to be fired for being trans, and it happens. Like you're acting like this is an antiquated belief that people people fire other people for being trans, and those businesses don't go out of business.
Okay,
I think, but even if it literally never happened, even if every time a business said we're gonna fire a person for being trans, it went out of business, I would still want it to be illegal.
You would. I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You would still want what to be illegal?
Even if in a hypothetical situation, every time a restaurant or a business said, we're not going to hire trans people, we're going to fire the trans people that already work for us. Yeah. If every time that happened, they went out of business instantly, I would still want it to be illegal to discriminate based off of that kind of stuff.
Even if it violates the First Amendment, right?
I don't think it violates the First Amendment. I don't.
Religious
You can't. Yeah, I don't think you have the religious freedom to. I don't think you have the freedom to discriminate against other people. You can't have unlimited freedoms. Some freedoms are more important than others. Actually, you know what? Sure, it goes against religious freedoms. I don't fuck the religious freedoms if it means that it discriminates against people.
Well, I don't know what else to say to that. If you're for going against the First Amendment, which
it decreases religious freedom, but I don't think it goes against the First Amendment.
You just said it goes against religious freedom.
Well, okay, if religious freedom meant literally every single religious freedom, then if my religious freedom was to kill Black people,
I just said that was nonviolent.
No, like, but that's still a violation. What if my religion? It would literally be a violation of my religious freedom if my religion said I have to kill Black people, right?
Okay. So
wouldn't it still be a violation, even if it's, of course that's justified. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes violations of religious freedoms are okay.
That's not violation. So if your violation of religious freedom is you can't murder someone, that's already a law. You can't murder someone.
It is a law that you're not allowed to discriminate against people based off of race, sex, and gender.
Now it's a law that you can't fire people based off of their gender identity. That is, by its definition, going against religious freedom, the First Amendment, because now you're saying, hey, your religion, it doesn't matter what your religion is, you still can't fire someone even if they end up being transgender, and it goes completely against your religion. And you're saying, you're using the extreme example of murdering Black people. I'll give you the example of the KKK. They're still an organization. Unfortunately, they still exist. The issue is that no one cares about them. Everyone hates them. Everyone scolds them. Everyone literally, they're just a small group of people who incite violence, do whatever, but they don't. Well, some people do, but overall, they're not freaking going out and murdering Black people in the bunches. So that's where the issue comes. Like, if the KKK has their freedom to exist, which, I mean, like, no one likes them.
Is the KKK discriminating against anyone when they like do their tiki torch? Are they discriminating against anyone, or are they doing a demonstration?
If they're not allowing Black people into that group, that's kind of discrimination.
I mean, I'd say that they should be forced to allow Black. If a Black person wants to join the KKK, they should be allowed. I'm gonna say it. They should be allowed. What? Why are you?
Because so that's against
Black people to not join the KKK. What if?
Well, yeah, if they want to join the KKK, whatever. But if the KKK doesn't want them, then they can't join the KKK because
the KKK. Wait, this is like a really weird example because the KKK isn't a business. They don't hire or fire people. It's a cult.
I know.
If you wanted to be more like realistic, you should be like a segregationist thing in the 1960s. That would be a more
but you bring up the 1960s, but.
Yeah, because the Civil Rights Act was necessary to end segregation. Segregation would still be going on if we didn't have that. And under your logic, the Civil Rights Act is a violation of freedom of speech because it makes it so that
the Civil Rights Act was necessary. The Civil Rights Act didn't impede on anyone's religion. I don't think anyone's, even if it's your religion, I don't see any mosques not hiring Black people because their whole religion is against freaking Black people. I don't see that. But if one exists, please let me know. I'm saying if your religion is explicitly against, let's say, trans or sexual orientation, whatever, the government cannot force you to keep that person employed if it goes against your religious belief. Now, with that example, again, it's the same thing. When the government gets involved and forces you to do things that you don't want to do, that's when the government messes up. Just like when the government didn't legalize same-sex marriage until 2015, 2014, whenever it was legalized. The government's involvement in that, once they were like, okay, whatever, we don't care, that's when the government was doing the right thing. Every time the government gets
that was a violation of freedom of religion. Now Christians
because you getting married isn't impeding on anyone else's religion. Now, okay, now here's another example. You get
married. It absolutely is. Wait, what? If you're forcing like churches to marry gay people against their own will? Yeah, of course.
Exactly. But there are churches who do marry gay people, not against their will, willingly.
Yeah, I think every church should marry gay people upon request. Yeah, totally.
Even if it goes against.
Even if it goes, I don't care if your religion says like you can't like this isn't like a convincing argument to me. I prioritize the rights of people to not be discriminated against because they're black over the rights of people to get fired because or the rights of people to fire others because they're black.
So do you agree with the whole consensus of like let's say conservatives going onto college campuses and not and getting kicked out because people on the college campus are like, we're going to get offended by what you say, so you can't be here. So they tell them to leave. Do you agree with that?
That's different because a college campus is a platform. You don't have an inherent right to a platform. And I think that if the people who own that platform are influenced enough by protesters that they want to not have a conservative, which is a political belief, not a protected class, which is like race or
but I was just using it as an example as censorship, like
yeah. So if let's say the College of New Jersey wants to have Ben Shapiro do a performance at their thing, they have a right to like deny Ben Shapiro that.
Yeah, no, they have a right? But I'm saying. Yeah. Do you think it's okay that people aren't allowed to speak up based on what their beliefs are? Like, let's say Ben Shapiro.
They're allowed to. They're just not owed a platform. Like I can't say to Carnegie Hall let me perform music at Carnegie Hall, and if you don't, it's a violation of my freedom of speech. No, it's a platform. That's totally different from like being able to get fired or being able to conduct a wedding. There's a difference between being able to speak your mind and being able to speak your mind on a specific platform. Nothing is stopping Ben Shapiro from from just saying whatever Ben Shapiro likes to say. Black people are inferior. But he doesn't have the right, or he doesn't have the right, but he can have the privilege of speaking on a platform.
Well,
no. A platform. You don't have a right to it.
On the platform,
right?
Okay, what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, but a college campus isn't a platform, and if the protesters are they have significant enough influence on the owners of the platform that the owners of the platform decide to not have Ben Shapiro on, and that's totally within their right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so with that logic, that Ben Shapiro has the freedom to say whatever he wants, right? Even if it's like black people are inferior, whatever. Right. So
yes, unless it's like inciting violence against someone. Yeah, he can say whatever he wants.
Well, okay. Well, there's some people on that side that do say that he does incite violence through his whatever he says.
There's an argument to be made that he's radicalizing people to the far right. I don't know if I would necessarily make that argument, but yeah.
So that's an example because. So you're saying
I think he should be allowed to say his far right beliefs. Like, I don't think there's a problem. Or there's a problem with that, but I don't think there's a legal problem with it.
So you're okay with the freedom of speech?
Yeah, I'm okay with freedom of speech, but there are limits. There's limits to everything. You can't have unlimited freedom, as I've said.
Oh, so yeah, that's where hate speech comes in. Do you classify hate speech? Like, do you think hate speech should be against the law?
I think inciting violence should be against the law. I think that private platforms should just not let people who intentionally act in bad faith to perform on their platforms. But that's a private thing. I don't think the government should enforce that.
So do you think that people should be forced to say people's preferred pronouns rather than the biological pronouns that they were born with?
I don't know about saying the pronouns on the street. This is a really complicated issue. I think that employees should respect the preferred pronouns of their employers. And in housing, I think they should also be respected. But like if you like walk past a person on the street and like they're like a trans guy and you're like, hey woman, like I don't think that's hate. I don't think that's hate speech.
Okay, well,
if maybe like if someone's like, I'm a woman, call me she, her, and then like you don't respect that, and then you intentionally say he, him, like as a way of like harassing them. I think at a certain point it does become hate speech. I don't know at what point that is, but yeah, that's
like, okay, so what if like I'm friends with, what if like I end up being friends with transgender and they tell me their pronouns, but I still refer to them as I wouldn't do that, but I'm just saying as an example, I still refer to them as the biological pronouns that they were born with. How would you like? And I would keep doing that. Like I would keep calling them by their
I would consider that harassment. I think that if you're doing it enough so as to intentionally harass them, yeah, that's harassment.
No, like not like I just refer, like I'm like, oh, he was like when I'm just referring to that person, I'm just like he. When
if you're doing it intentionally, such as to harass her, yeah, I would consider that a harassment.
Even though biologically, if I believe that biologically they were born a woman, so that would just be
yes.
So
if you're doing it intentionally, such as to harass her or him or whatever, like I don't remember what the specifics of this hypothetical were. Yeah, if you're doing it intentionally, such as to harass them, and you do it repeatedly enough, yeah.
Well, so that's where the issue comes. Is like, what do you define as harassment? Because like Ben Shapiro, I know when he's in a debate platform,
there's a legal definition for harassment. I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, no, but when we're referring to gender pronouns, like you're saying, oh, it's harassment. Like I'm confused because are you saying it's harassment that I'm just referring to their biological pronouns? Or are you saying like it's harassment because I'm intentionally doing it because I know it hurts them?
Yeah, if you're intentionally doing it because you know it hurts them, that's harassment.
Okay,
that's like definitionally harassment.
Yeah. See, that's definite. But if
you're like incredibly stupid and you just don't realize the fact that like that their pronouns are just the pronouns that they want to be referred to as, and you're really just a really stupid person and you just keep on referring them by the wrong pronouns, I guess that's not harassment. But this is such a niche situation where I don't feel like this is important. Ben Shapiro is smart enough to know what people's pronouns are. Cool. How about we like change to? Yeah, we should return to like our original topic.
Yeah, the topic.
How about we talk about whether or not you think people's pronouns are what they are, or like whether their gender are what they are.
So, okay, so personally, I respect everyone's pronouns, whoever, like whatever they prefer their pronouns to be. I don't like, it's literally not even a second thought to just say what their pronouns are. But as far as whether saying like I'm another gender than the gender I was born with, as far as that, I haven't done as much research on that, but from what I do know is that gender dysphoria is existent, and people who do have gender dysphoria, you know, believe that they're in the wrong, they were born to the wrong gender. I think that's classified as a mental disorder. So for whoever has gender dysphoria and wants me to call them whatever the opposite pronoun, whatever, I think to that I can't really like biologically you were born a certain gender and
certain sex. Gender is different. Sex refers to the physical character. You acknowledge that gender and sex are different.
I can't. Do
you want me to list? I can list you like a list of medical resources that all affirm that gender and sex is different. We the reason why we have definitions for words is like not because we want to be all like inclusive SJWs, but it's because that these words serve a utility. If the fact that we have people who are born as men and are assigned male at birth, but they identify as women when they grow up, shows that there is a difference between what people may feel, or that it shows that there are people who identify differently from the gender that they were assigned or the sex that they were assigned, right?
Well, so where does it show that? Like, I'm confused because like it obviously doesn't show that in their reproductive parts. So like, does it show it in the? Because in order to determine whether you have gender dysphoria, mental disorder, you have
trans refers to identifying as a gender that is different from the one you were assigned at birth. So not all dysphoric people, or not all trans people are dysphoric, but all dysphoric people are trans.
So it's okay
Sandra's
for me to.
Sandra's finally here.
Oh wow! About freaking time.
I texted you both 30
He told me not to answer.
We're debating.
It was 2 minutes later.
Told me not to
Okay.
answer. Okay. Sandra, mute yourself.
Okay, yo, I don't know how. Give me a sec.
Okay, whatever. So
Yeah,
so sex refers to the sexual characteristics that you were born with. Like, you know, I don't have to name them.
Yeah.
Gender refers to the social characteristics that we assign to those people. So gender would be things like, oh, you're a woman, so you have long hair, or you're a man, so you wear suits. It's things like that. So gender is by definition a social construct. Because the things that we assign to what we consider to be men and women aren't biological, right? There's nothing in our biology that says that men have to have long hair or short hair, or that we have to wear suits, or that women have to have long hair, wear dresses, like the color pink. You know?
So can I say that? Can I say that I'm Asian, even though I was? Because.
Well, race is also a social construct. I mean, you are Asian, right? Race is also a social
okay, I should have said black. Damn it.
Race is also a social construct, right?
Yeah, right.
There's no defining line between like black and white, right? Just like how there's no defining line between like what is a woman to you? Not in like the sexual way, in like the gender way. What is a woman? What do you define as?
Well, yeah, like with someone who has long hair, and someone who.
But there are plenty of women who don't.
I define it exactly. As breast.
So basically, the argument is no matter what characteristics you assign to women, there will be women who are left out of that definition.
Yeah.
The most inclusive and most useful definition is just that women are people who identify as women, right? Even if you go down to chromosomes, well, there are men who have XX chromosomes. There are women who have XY chromosomes. It's rare.
Well, yeah, so that's my question is that can I identify as a black man? Can I identify as a black man by that logic?
Well, no.
But isn't black a social construct? And man is also a social construct.
The difference between race and gender, or no, I guess this would be a similarity. These aren't things. No, gender is something that you identify as, while race is something that society generally prescribes to you. You can call yourself a black man, but you're not going to present as a black man to anyone else. You're not going to be treated in society.
I identify as a black man, right? Because race is a social construct.
So if you want to call yourself black, then you can, but in practice, you're not actually going to be black. Like, you're not going to be treated as in society as a black man.
Why not?
Well, because you don't look like black.
But I can identify as a man even though I don't look like a man?
Wait, I feel like I gave a bad answer to that. There are people who identify as black who don't look black. I'm pretty sure there's like a village of people in like Idaho that they're all white, but they all identify as black. Yeah. Just like there's a lot of people who look exactly like men who identify as women. like these aren't perfect descriptors for
So so by that logic, I'm asking,
generally the most inclusive definition is self-identification. I don't think there's any other means of identification that will lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, so that's what, like, I don't have a problem, like, obviously I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying, by that logic, can't I identify myself, because it's based off of personal identity, can I identify myself as a black man, because both of those are social constructs? Obviously I'm neither, but I don't identify as either. But if I say I'm a black man,
I think the difference is if you genuinely believe it, right?
But how would you know that?
I wouldn't. There's no way to know for sure what I believe. You could be a white supremacist, and you could say white supremacist beliefs. You could say or black people are inferior, and you could even say that you're a white supremacist. There would be no way for me to objectively know whether or not you are a white supremacist. I can't go inside your head. Just like there's no way for you to know, like, that I am looking at hand sanitizer right now.
Exactly. So the only way. So that's where the issue comes. Like, how do
there's also no physical characteristic that could possibly determine what it is. There's no physical. Yeah, there's no physical characteristic that define that if a man has this, it's a man, or if a woman has this, it's a woman. There's nothing.
Well, medically speaking, yes, there is. How do doctors know what they're going to put on your birth certificate? They look at what.
Well, yeah, when you're assigned something at birth, that's different. That would be.
Well, yeah, that's sex. Like, yeah, right. So that's sex, right?
Practically, it just makes sense to give. It just makes sense for doctors to assign people the sexual characteristics based on the sexual characteristics, because most of the time, but people should be able to change their gender.
Yeah, I'm not saying
not change their gender, but like officially change their gender. Like the gender is the same, no matter what.
Well, so that I have two questions. Again, if I identify as a black man, I still don't know how you don't know if I'm genuinely I identify as a black man. Are you now gonna address me as a black man? And then if I want to let's say I want to apply to college applications. I want to get the benefits of affirmative action. So I want to go and I'm going to identify myself as a black man. You think on college applications, you think that's okay? Or black man.
I mean, personally, I think that's a little fucked up.
Well, yes, but.
I mean, if you want to, race and gender are different because there's no, they're both social constructs in the sense that there's no biological component to gender. There's a biological component to sex, but not gender, right? There also are biological components to race, right? On average, black people have darker skin. They have bigger noses. The social construct comes in where we decide to draw the lines, right?
But you said the physical attributes don't matter as okay, so if you were born with let's say male reproductive parts physically, but you have the freedom to identify as a female. If I was born with brown skin and not a huge nose, even though it is, but if not a huge nose, and I still identify as black because I can identify as black because it's a social construct. So that's where the confusion comes in, because at what point do you draw the line? Because if you say that if you're biologically, a female, but you can identify as a male or whatever gender you want, then the question comes, at which part do you draw the line? Because now I mean, it's a social construct. So race is a social construct too. So I want to identify as a black male.
Well, no, I don't think a social construct means you can just identify as what you want it to be. Social construct means that society determines which one is which. At large, we recognize that the genders are male and female, right? But this doesn't have to be this way. There's nothing that says that we have to only have male. I'll distinguish between male and female and girl and boy, because male and female is the biological term. There's nothing that says we only have to have girl and boy. There's been other societies in history that have had 3 genders. there's been like two-spirit in indigenous cultures. In India, there's a third gender, right? There's nothing biological about gender.
Okay, so if a doctor's treating you, right, and
they would treat you based on sex,
right? So, but
they
then,
would,
so like,
I think that the issue of like doctors is not. I think that there can be. You can have on your your birth certificate is different from your medical records. On your medical records, the doctor will know you were born, you were assigned male at birth, and now you identify as a woman, right? But in most contexts in society, this isn't going to be relevant. People like women are just going to be considered women, and men are just going to be considered men. Mm-hmm. The people that identify as that. I think a more relevant discussion would be the bathroom issue. Who goes into which bathrooms? I think that people should just go into whichever bathroom they feel comfortable in. Because there's no other way we can enforce this.
Well, then that question comes up where it's like, again, which part do you draw the line? Now that we can go to any bathroom, I honestly think that you should just have a unisex bathroom. You don't have to distinguish between man and female.
I mean, yeah, like I think we shouldn't have male and female bathrooms in general. Yeah. But like in today's society, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you should be able to go into whichever bathroom you want, because there's no line you could draw as to like males have to be like this, females have to be this in order to go into the bathroom. If you want it to be genitals, how do you enforce that? How do you make sure that like people with penises are going into like male bathrooms, people with vaginas are going into female bathrooms? Also, a lot of people with penises are women. A lot of people with vaginas are men. You're going to inevitably have people who...
The biggest way to enforce that, I think, would be as long as you're passing, then you should be allowed to go into the bathrooms, because by that logic, any child predator would be like, oh, you know what, I'm a transgender woman anyway, so like he walks into the female bathroom and now you have a bigger problem on your hand. So I think, and like obviously that man's not a woman because he didn't put anything into becoming a woman. He didn't put really any efforts into becoming a woman. So now anyone can say, look, I'm this gender, I want to go to that bathroom. So I think the easiest way to get around both of those issues is like the issue where like I know people who have trouble, like I don't know which bathroom to go to because I don't know like because like they're trans. Yeah. They don't. So I think the easiest way to get around that is just unisex bathrooms.
Yeah. To the looking like the gender thing. That sounds like it sounds nice in practice, but in a sense, you're kind of regulating what people can wear, right? If it's based off of what people, or you're regulating what people can look like. If you're saying if you're saying like you're a man, you have to look like this in order to be able to go to the men's bathroom. Like in practice, you kind of are regulating what people have to look like, right?
So again, by that logic, if you stop regulation of what everyone looks like, no one cares what you look like. You can identify as whatever because it's a social construct, whatever. By that logic, again, I'm a black man. I'm going to put on my application whether I'm a black man or not.
Well, gender and race are different, right?
Well, it's a social construct in the end. You're like, because gender is a social construct, right? You explained it as a social construct. You were like,
well, they're social constructs, but race does have biological components, while gender does not.
Race, well,
there are biological components to race.
Differentiation because now you're saying, well, gender is a completely separate from sex.
We could have races that are based off of eye color. You know, we could have races that are people with brown eyes versus like the people with blue eyes.
Well, the color black is also a social construct. How do we know the color black is black? It's because
exactly.
We've made into
the line is where we define like who is what.
Exactly. So, but by your logic, it's like we shouldn't have to put those.
Do you think there's intrinsic harm to calling yourself like a black man?
To myself or like in general?
If you genuinely believe it. Like if you were to call yourself a black man and you genuinely believed it, do you think there would be
If I
like some sort of
genuinely, like, in
intrinsic
my head, in,
if like the worst thing that happens is some people call themselves a thing that they aren't, but and the positives are that like suicidality among trans people goes down, like the rates of the amount of people that sexually abuse them goes down. I think this is a fair trade we can make. If the worst thing that can happen is that a person will call themselves a man even though they look like you, like I don't think that's a strong argument that we should not have people be allowed to identify as the gender that they want. I think we should probably move on to the next topic.
Okay.
At this point, right?
Yeah, I know, because we were just.
I think we're going in circles.
Yeah. What was the other topic? It was
drug
decriminalization. So I think we can agree that weed should be legalized across all 50 states. I think that's
sure.
pretty obvious. What do you think what do you mean by drug decriminalization? What do you think that we should do?
Yeah, so I think that by decriminalization, I mean that instead of treating it as a criminal offense, we treat it as a medical issue. So there's many angles to approach this. Philosophically, I believe that people... What?
No, yeah. Okay, go.
Yeah, so philosophically, I believe that people have the right to do with their bodies what they want to, as long as they're not hurting anyone else. And pragmatically, current existing data seems to indicate that decriminalizing drugs leads to better outcomes in the long run. So one good case study of this is in Portugal, where prior to 2001, they had a really bad heroin epidemic, worse than ours currently, proportionally. But at that point, they decriminalized drug usage for all drugs. After that, the number of people who voluntarily entered treatment increased significantly, overdose deaths and HIV infections plummeted, incarceration for drug-related offenses decreased, and the rates of problematic drug use fell. I also have a report by Release about how drug decriminalization has led to lower drug usage wherever it has been implemented across the globe. And the most prominent examples of this are Belgium, Estonia, Australia, Mexico, Uruguay, Czechia, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and as I mentioned, Portugal, as well as Spain. One of the most disastrous policies of the last century in the United States has been the war on drugs, where we've increased our tough on crime mentality. So since then, drug use hasn't gone down, but gang violence and incarceration have skyrocketed. Every year, 1.3 million people are locked up for drug-related offenses. That's 2.5 times the state of Wyoming. Thousands of communities and countless families have their entire livelihoods ruined as a result of this. We disobey the entire medical community time and time again as we deal with drug usage as a criminal issue rather than a public health issue.
Do we even disagree on this? I feel like...
Do you think that all drugs should be decriminalized?
Okay, so when you said that, I thought you meant decriminalize it and do nothing about it. That's where I disagreed, because I agree that we shouldn't criminalize drug addiction, because that's obviously a medical issue. So I think we should, instead of putting so much money towards literally cracking down on drugs, we should put it towards like service centers that help people who are addicted to these drugs, and helping, like providing them with like clean needles, and instead of like making them use dirty needles and then freaking end up being more of a problem to us in the future.
Yeah, so what decriminalization means is that it's legal to use drugs, but it's illegal to sell them. So in practice, what happens is once you decriminalize the drugs, the demand for cartels and gangs plummets because it's illegal to sell them, but it's legal to use them. So the people who want to use the drugs will go to legal, safe injection sites, or they will seek treatment. Yeah. There's no reason for illegal drug activity to happen.
Yeah, there was nothing we disagreed on. I think
that's unfortunate.
I know. Because I thought when you said decriminalization, I was like, oh, okay, he just wants to freaking let this whole thing run free. But the thing is with the cartel, like even though it would crack down a lot on the whole drug trade, they would find something else to bring into the U.S. and then it would just be
part of the reason why cartels are so rampant is because you can't report cartels if you're a drug user, because if you report them, then they arrest you because you use drugs. If we decriminalize it, everyone will be able to report the cartels. There will be no reason. Maybe some cartels will still function because they'll be able to threat people with violence to not report. But I don't think that's going to be a significant issue.
Yeah, it would plummet. No, we agree on that.
I have like
on that. What?
Yeah. Is there like another topic you want to discuss? Israel versus Palestine?
I don't know. You really want to debate on that? I don't have enough information on that to debate.
No, yeah, I don't want to debate if you like don't really know much about it. I just feel very strongly about that.
What? Yeah, I know. I can tell you. That's like the 4th time you brought it up, so I can tell.
Well, it's the first time I brought it up in this debate.
Yeah, but the 4th time you brought it up in the past 2 days.
Do you want to discuss like gun control and stuff?
Ooh, yeah. Okay.
So what's your opinion on that?
Okay, so my opinion is you have the right to bear arms, but not military grade weapons. So like AR-15s, AK-47s, anything above a pistol caliber, you have no reason to bear. That's it.
We're not going to disagree on this, but I'm going to say my position anyway. On average, the fact that we have so much gun violence in this country can be pretty much attributed to the fact that we have so many guns, right? On average, having a gun in the household massively increases your chances of like a gun-related incident. It can get stolen. You can have an accident with the kids. There's so many things, and your chances of preventing like a robbery or a murder with your own gun is pretty low comparatively. So the amount of lives that the guns take away is pretty high. I don't know if we should make it illegal to have like assault weapons, because the data seems to show that most of the gun violence in this country is caused by handguns.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I think that people should be armed.
But the issue
I think you have the right to be armed. I personally wouldn't. And I think you can agree that the gun culture that we have in this country is fucking horrendous. The NRA is a horrible institution. Yeah.
I don't know. But the thing is, where the most gun violence does occur in gun-free zones. But the issue, like because people do use that argument, is like most of the gun violence occurs like Chicago. Chicago is literally the toughest city on guns, and has the most gun violence by far. So that's just the only what's another, Vermont? Or was it was either Vermont?
Vermont has like very lax gun laws. I'm pretty sure that's not an example. Vermont has like
Vermont, because I was gonna say Vermont has so Vermont, there was an example with Vermont.
I don't think that like comparing like big cities that are like densely populated and very poor, comparing them to like pretty rich, mostly like not dense states. I don't think that's a very good comparison to make your argument. But I do generally agree with like the sentiment. But yeah, back to the NRA. The NRA is like a horrible institution. They like tend to promote like these conservative social ideas, like the fact that like you're very macho if you own a gun. Like
they have to sell their product somehow.
Yeah, it's. I think we should fuck the NRA.
Oh, okay. Wait, another thing. Okay, wait. Finish your thought, because I
wasn't gonna say anything else.
Okay, so another issue I have with Black Lives Matter is, so Black Lives Matter takes donations, right? Those donations, by and large, like they've donated $100 million to Bernie Sanders' campaign. They've donated a couple other hundreds of millions of dollars to to Democratic parties, right? To promote their promotions. It's literally millionaires, all of those people that they donated the money to just for their campaign. They're all millionaires. Instead, and that's the issue I have, is because Black Lives Matter is it's all like, oh, we need to fund these communities, they've literally raised hundreds of millions of dollars that they could have given to those communities that they're like, oh, we've got to fund them. So that's like, I'm so confused. Because I don't
know how true that is. I'm not gonna like be here to white knight for the entire Black Lives Matter movement. But I mean, I guess the argument that can be made is people like Bernie Sanders and people like AOC and like Elizabeth Warren, they're advocating for policies that would like redistribute funds from wealthy neighborhoods to very low income neighborhoods, right?
But
so maybe like, so I don't know. I assume they stopped donating to like Bernie Sanders after he dropped out, right? If they did,
no, he's still on the ballot.
He's still on the ballot. I don't see why they would donate to his campaign. But anyway, I can see an argument to be made that by donating to him, you are increasing the likelihood of systemic change happening rather than like the individual change that you were doing by giving money. It's great to give money to these communities, but nothing substantial is going to happen unless policy changes. And the only way that's going to happen is if we put good people in Congress and presidency.
I'll get back to that. But how do you feel about, like, since the 1960s on the war on poverty, how LBJ, like, there wasn't much funding on schools back before 1960s, and then when there was more funding on in LBJ's war on poverty, he started funding billions of dollars to the low-income communities on education. And ever since then, education requirements have been getting so much lower, and we're actually statistically stupider than.
I mean, you can't just like throw money at a problem and expect it to fix itself. There's much more you have to do than to just give money to these communities. I think one of the main problems in like institutional poverty is the fact that schools are funded by property taxes. So low income communities are going to continue to have worse schools. They're not going to get any better because it's not like everyone in the community is going to get richer, but rich communities get to have well funded schools like Fairlawn. That's I think a big problem.
So that's where the question comes, is like, how do you, like, obviously you can't throw money at the problem and then fix it, but that's because they're talking about defunding the police and putting the police in education or whatever they put.
I think that there's a lot of roles that police do that will be much better done by maybe like independent traffic patrols or social workers in the case of like suicide cases, or like domestic abuse cases. I think that like instead of sending like a crowd of police officers, maybe send like two social workers and a police officer. That would be much better. Also, I think that the militarization of the police needs to be decreased. I think that there's so many better things that we could spend money on in terms of police. I don't think that New York needs a $5.9 billion police budget. That makes the NYPD the 7th largest army in the world. I don't see why that's necessary.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues is the allocation of the funds that go to the police.
You have to admit, police are very corrupt, and they're not at all held accountable for anything that they do in the vast majority of cases.
Well, okay, so that's where we can agree, where qualified immunity, which is obviously like should be repealed. I don't know why qualified immunity is still in the freaking system, and the police unionization should be banned, because police unions are literally the ones that fight for police officers to be what's the word?
Police unions are horrible.
Yes, terrible.
I won't disagree with that.
What? So there's police reform that we can agree on. Like,
yeah, I think there's a lot of different ideas. Have you seen Campaign Zero? It's basically it's like a list of like 8 different things that have shown to those are like realistic policies that I would like push for right now. And I mean, when I say defund the police, I don't mean like police budget becomes zero. I mean put funding from the police into areas that it would be much better spent in. Reinvest in communities that are filled with crime right now. Stop the militarization.
Okay, so stop the militarization. I get that. That makes 100. So if we stop the militarization, I think they need de-escalation training, not just for like because they suck at de-escalating.
I think that in a lot of communities, sorry to interrupt you, they should they should dissolve the police they should dissolve the police system and rehire them, but do a much better job of rehiring them, because right now there's an epidemic of white nationalist groups infiltrating police. The FBI did a report on this. They found that there's a massive amount of white nationalists in police stations all around the country. That's like a massive problem.
So that's the thing. Is like you look on what their hiring process is online, and their hiring process, it's like it says it's so like in depth. Like you have to take a polygraph, you have to do like you have to pass like multiple tests, you have to pass a physical, pass a medical exam, pass a psychological test. You have to pass all these tests. But in reality, none of them, like a lot of them don't really go through with these policies. So I think enforcing that is the first thing. Like the hiring is where it literally starts. And if you're not enforcing like all of these policies that you're going to say, like a background check where they literally like go and like ask other people, like if you're mentally stable, like I think all of these are really important that police precincts just don't go through with.
I think we can both like agree that police reform is good. How about we go to a topic where we might have more disagreement? What's your opinion on Trump?
I think he's an idiot.
You think he's an idiot? I think he's a fascist.
A fascist?
Yeah.
A fascist. Oh yeah, I saw on your Instagram you were like fascist, something about fascist.
I say a lot of things about fascists.
Yes. So what a fascist?
Yeah.
I think he says a lot of dumb things. I think he
I think that he's becoming increasingly fascist as the protests have gone on. So there's a lot of like fascism isn't like a coherent ideology where there's like theory written on the issue by like educated people, and we have like self-identifying fascists all around the country. It's not like that. Fascism is incredibly unique because it's a very incoherent ideology, and it generally forms from specific socioeconomic conditions within countries. It forms when people are the conditions within a country are so bad that the animosity towards liberalism is instead pointed away from like the rich and powerful to marginalized groups that and the rich use this as a way of distracting from the problems in society. So right now, I would argue that Trump he harnesses the working class sentiment of this country by saying like I will drain the swamp, I'll fix our corrupt system, I'll bring jobs back from Mexico and whatnot, I'll increase benefits and stuff. You know, he says all of these things, but he doesn't actually blame the problems that are causing these things. He's blaming immigrants. He's blaming Black people. He's blaming the left. You know,
the left does the same thing. Where like honestly, that's the biggest problem with politics is they're never gonna find middle ground, because there's always people on the left who are like, yeah, the right is filled with fascists, the right is filled with a bunch of corrupt people, and then the right saying, oh yeah, the left is filled with communists, it's filled with a bunch of corrupt people. It's like you can argue the same thing with Joe Biden, you can argue the same thing with, I don't know about Bernie Sanders, but you can argue the same thing with both sides. So the issue you
think you can argue that Joe Biden is a communist but not Bernie Sanders?
No, I meant corrupt. Like you can argue that both parties have issues. Like
the difference is that the left, like in the traditional sense of the word, you know, like socialists, communists, has no power in this country, while fascists are in the White House.
What do you mean that socialists and communists don't have?
Yeah, so like leftists, we are inches from fascism. We are comparatively light years away from leftism, right? The idea that we can have like a socialist revolution and overthrow the capitalist system and, you know, kill rich people, that's so far away. It's so unbelievably far away. The fact that Trump will say, oh, they're coming to kill the American system, while himself arguing against the same institutions that he's undermining, is completely...
Well, how do you think closer to fascism than socialism or communism? Just because the executive branches...
Because a transition to fascism would not require a revolution in like the sense that it would require the entire population to overthrow our existing systems. A transition to fascism would be nice and smooth, right? It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be we overthrow the system. It could be just as easy as Trump declaring a state of emergency because he lost the election, and him seizing more power within the Constitution. Maybe declaring the Constitution null and void because we have a national emergency. The communists are taking over.
See, that's the issue, because Trump is literally like, everyone on the right is completely like, no one would support him if he did that.
I disagree. If Trump were to declare himself dictator right now, his entire fan base would unwittingly support him. That's
because everyone on the right goes based off of the Constitution.
Not everyone on the right.
What?
Not everyone on the right. No. Have you like seen like a Trump? Have you seen like Trump fans? They would literally, like, if Trump shot a person on Fifth Avenue, he would not care.
Okay,
they would not care.
There are some Trump fans, but then you see, like, there was a rally in Tulsa, where the Trump supporters, literally there was a Black Lives Matter protest happening in spite, like, that's the issue. Again, it's the left. It's left. The issue I have with left-leaning people is like, oh, we're gonna buy out Trump's entire rally, and so other people can't attend who actually want to listen to Trump's viewpoints, right? So what they did was they bought out half the stadium, in which they didn't show up, so pretty much half the stadium was empty. That's completely, like, you're censoring an entire rally.
That's not censorship. You can call it scummy. I don't. It's not censorship. By preventing, you're still broadcast. Millions of people watch that on TV. He wasn't censored.
But if you're not allowing people to go see this in person, if you're stopping people,
it's a form of protest. Yeah, it's a form of protest.
A form of protest would be standing outside the rally and being like, okay, Black Lives Matter, whatever. They did that in Tulsa. So that's what happened in Tulsa, and they were like, what happened is they went on the stage and started rallying.
I think we're getting a little bit off topic. My point was Trump has already threatened free speech, right? He says that if you burn the flag, you should be deported. He says that peaceful protesters should get shot. He's threatening libel laws.
When did he say peaceful protesters should get shot?
He's calling the peaceful protesters rioters and saying that they should get shot. He's calling Antifa a terrorist group.
He called the protesters and the rioters thugs. So did Obama, though. There's video of Obama calling the rioters and the protesters thugs. But no one,
these ones.
No, because again, there was when Ferguson happened. That was.
Yeah, I think there was actually like rioting, and that was only one thing.
It was. Well, there
was only one example of that, and it was a riot. In this case, there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of protests, and almost none of them have been violent at all. But Trump
was burned to the ground.
I mean, it didn't. There were riots, yeah, and it was bad. But first of all, that was one example. The vast majority of the protests have been completely.
Yeah, I don't deny that. Yeah, I don't deny that.
Yeah, of course, you're not denying it. Trump is literally fixating on calling all of these rioters. He's calling these people. Have you heard his speech from July 4th? He called the protesters un-American.
Well, yeah, but because he thinks that they're okay. Well, that's when you have to actually see the context of what he's saying. He's saying they're un-American because they're against the American system. Because the rioters are like, oh, America's corrupt. Oh, America, whatever. If people who don't believe that the American system is corrupt, if people don't,
he's not calling them not American. He's not calling them anti-American. He's calling them not Americans. He's differentiating between calling people. And he's saying he said that they're not Americans, like Americans, like I'm an American. Like he's saying that they're not Americans. He's insinuating. He's insinuating that these people are traitors to the state just by peacefully protesting.
Well, okay, you can say a majority of them are peaceful, which they are, but then you see that there's some of them that are destroying, and of course, just as
vast minority.
What?
There's been a few examples of rioting, and from what I've heard, most of those examples have been people infiltrating the protests who weren't actually part of them. who are intentionally
So that's
causing.
why you can't like blame a whole group of over something that only a few did, right? So that's when it comes to like he was obviously referring to the rioters and looters
No,
as
he's
thugs.
referring to all of them.
Well, yes. So then you can see the same example that Obama did, but no one called Obama out on it. Like, let's see.
I mean, I don't know the specific. I mean, this is like weird whataboutism, right?
Well, yeah, because
Like,
the thing is, like, you can call.
I'm not
like,
here to
people
defend
who-
Obama.
That's true, but
I'm
you can
also
call.
not here to defend the specific instance in which Obama called a riot that did happen a riot, while Trump is calling literally every single peaceful protest that's happening rioters, non-American, traitors to the state. Do you think there's a difference?
Well, I think if he's specifically because the
consider the context of Trump's fan base, they're all against the protests. They're not going to interpret it as oh, like the he's saying that the peaceful protesters are good, but the rioters are bad. Like, no, the Trump supporters are against the protest.
Yes,
by and large.
Like, yes, they can be against the protest, and the thing is, like, they have the freedom to be against the protest, and if they don't see any proof of any racism, systemic racism that that there is, then yeah, they don't have to believe it. But I think when the tweet, if we're talking about specifically the tweet where Trump said like thugs, he did that specifically right after Minneapolis burned, right?
No, I'm talking about his 4th of July speech, and that wasn't just the only time he said it. He said it pretty much every opportunity. He's never said protesters. He said rioters. He literally doesn't say the word protesters
in any of his. Because I don't know, I didn't watch. I don't watch Trump. I tend to stay away from it.
I watched his 4th of July speech and his July 3rd speech. In both of them, he called them rioters. He did not say protesters once. And these are like the main speeches. If he meant protesters, he would have said protesters.
Well, was he talking about? Like, I'm confused because if
he said these rioters are anti-American and they want to destroy your livelihood, your culture.
Well, yes, the rioters. Yes, the rioters. If he's specifically referring to the rioters, the ones that are causing.
But he's not specifically. Well, he is referring to the rioters in.
Right, because he said.
No, but he's saying that the protesters are all rioters, and that all of the rioters in his July 4th speech.
He said that all protesters are rioters.
Well, he didn't literally say those words, but he insinuated that, yes, the protesters are all rioters.
Well, what did he say exactly? Because
I don't have the exact words, but the context of what he said it in heavily implied it. And I'm not giving Trump enough charitability to assume that he meant something different.
Well, yeah, but I'm not gonna assume that he referred to all the protesters as rioters, because even as stupid as he is, I honestly don't think he can possibly be that stupid.
Also, I mean, we both agree that he's incredibly stupid.
Yes, yes.
Could you imagine if he was actually competent? We would be in hell right now. If he actually got his fascist policies put through, that would be a nightmare.
Well, what did he did? He put a lot of policies through.
He's put a lot through. Could you imagine if he was actually competent? He failed to get the wall through.
He also lowered the black unemployment rate by 3%.
The black unemployment rate was already going down, and it was consistent with the general trend that was already happening.
No, it went up 3% with Obama. It went down because with Obama, what Obama did, he put more regulations on businesses in low income.
It went up in the beginning of Obama's presidency, but it's been going down ever since. And then now it's like all the way up.
Well, now it's all the way up because
for the past it's since like 2010. The unemployment rate across every race, across every gender, across every single demographic has been going down like significantly. The fact that we have black unemployment rate right now cannot be attributed to Trump. Rather, it can be attributed to the policies that Obama put through, and they were just the effects of that were just continuing as Trump went into office.
But the policies what?
There's no specific policy that Trump did that caused the black unemployment rate to go down.
He lowered the regulations that black people have to put in order to.
What specific regulation? What specific policy was this?
I have no idea. but I know that the causation for the lowering of the unemployment rate was directly related to.
Let me find a graph of the Black unemployment rate in the past
20 years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So here, I don't know if it'll show up in chat, but here, am I able to share screen? Okay, let me just describe it to you. It goes up and it peaks in 2010, and then it's been going down ever since. The general trend has just been continuing ever since Obama was president.
By year.
Yeah, you can look it up if you want.
Yeah. Because I don't remember where, but I read something.
Bragging about like specifically the Black unemployment rate is just like it's meaningless.
Well, yeah, but if we're
also unemployment rate doesn't mean much. You also have to consider. Yoav said Yarden's correct. You also have to consider the fact like how well are these jobs paying? What's the underemployment rate? What about things like healthcare costs? What about?
Well, I think a lower unemployment rate is overall a good thing, and I think lowering the Black unemployment rate is a very good thing because
economists tend to agree that the ideal unemployment rate is between 5% and 6%. So 3.5% is actually too low for an economy, for like a stable economy. I'm not like an economics expert, but I do know that you have to have a specific level of unemployment in order for the switchability of employers. I'm not an
expert. Well, the goal here is to try to get Black people out of poverty, considering they make up a significant.
The way to get there's other factors besides unemployment to decide how well the economy is functioning. What about income inequality?
That's not about, but if we're talking about Black livelihood, then you should be focusing on the unemployment rate because
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Black unemployment is one of many factors that you can look at to see how well an economy is doing. Right now, we're at a level of economic inequality that's been unseen for the past millennia. Also, hundreds of thousands of people, not hundreds, millions of people are uninsured for medical insurance. Tens of thousands of people die every year because of our horrible healthcare industry. Generally, wages are stagnant while productivity is skyrocketing. You can't just look at unemployment, especially when there's other metrics such as underemployment, which better show how well the economy is functioning.
Well, if we're talking about trying to get Black people out of poverty.
Getting them out of poverty isn't just unemployment isn't just the only thing. There's also the price of goods and services, which have gone up since Trump has has become president because he's put tariffs on China and he's pulled out of the TPP.
But we're talking again. If we're talking about getting out of poverty,
the price of goods and services is crucial to whether or not people are in poverty.
According to the Brookings Institute, the top three things that you have to do to get out of poverty are get a job, graduate high school, and don't have kids out of wedlock. That's literally the top three things you have to do. 75% of the people who follow that end up in the middle class. So if we're looking at it from trying to get out of poverty on an individual level, if you're Black, you want to get out of poverty, your best bet is to get a job, stay employed. Sorry.
I mean, this is completely different right now. Whether or not someone gets a job isn't just affected by like whether or not they want to get a job, right? There are so many different factors that lead to the disparities between Black unemployment and white unemployment, and Black poverty and white poverty. It's so much more complicated than we'll just get a job and you'll do better. This applies to white people and Black people, but it especially applies to Black people because Black communities on the whole are very fucked up around the country. It's
What do you like? Can you define that? The
like they have higher rates of, they have way lower levels of wealth, way higher rates of crime, you know, gang violence, over policing. We disagree on like whether or not they're discriminated against. I feel like that has a role.
Okay, but so that's where the issue comes in, because if you're saying that unemployment or employment doesn't have, there's other factors, which I agree there are other factors, but one of the biggest factors is whether you have a job. I mean, if you don't have a job, you're not getting out of poverty. I think we can both agree to that. So if unemployment is very important, actually, if we're talking not about the economy, if we're talking about Black livelihood, if the goal here is to get Black people out of poverty into the middle class, then all you have to do is those three things. One of those three things includes getting a job. So you do have to get a job in order to freaking get out of poverty. I think that's pretty
You're
obvious.
looking at it at an individual level. Sure, individually, if you do get a job, you have a better chance of getting out of poverty. But on the whole, it's so much harder, even if you do get a job right now, to get out of poverty due to things like the fact that prices of goods are going up, the fact that wages are not keeping up with productivity, the fact that underemployment is also pretty high right now. You can't just look at one statistic and determine how well an economy is doing because of that.
It's not one statistic. It's literally
It's not.
You get a job, you will not be, okay, well, I'm not saying you will not be in poverty. Your likelihood of being in poverty will significantly decrease because you have a job. Like, yeah, you're not going to be able to afford the best things, right? You're not going to be able to afford.
One of the other things you said was get married, right?
No, don't have kids out of wedlock.
Don't have kids. What was the other thing?
Don't have kids out of wedlock.
What was the other thing?
Get a job and graduate high school, which Black people have the lowest rates of, which, again, the likelihood of you graduating high school without a father figure in the house is very, very low.
I've heard that, like the Brookings.
Oh, and the fourth one would be don't commit a crime, but no one really mentions that because.
Sure, but I've heard that Brookings Institute thing. I'm pretty sure if you control for race, like within that study, it shows that it doesn't actually help Black people. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't have like that on me because I didn't prepare that for like the debate. But
it says that it doesn't work for Black people.
Like the rate at which it helps you get out of poverty decreases for Black people. When you control for race, it works much better for white people than it does for Black people. The ability to get out of poverty. What I'm trying to say is the ability to get out of poverty is such a multifaceted issue. You can't just focus on things like unemployment, like not having kids, because there's underlying reasons as to why people won't or will have kids and won't be employed.
What?
We should do.
What would be the reason to not have? What, like you said,
one of the reasons why people don't or might not be able to complete high school is because in their community, like they have a very crime-ridden community, so it's very difficult for them to attend school every day, and also the schools are very low funded. Well, if you're in a lower poverty neighborhood, your ability to get rich is so much harder than if you're in Fairway.
And that's economic privilege. So that's what I'm saying is an Asian born into low income communities and a Mexican born into low income communities, a white person, they all have, like you and me, we're both different skin colors. Even Sandra's freaking Black, Blasian, whatever. It's where we were all born though with privilege, right? I'm born by definition. Me and Sandra lack the privilege that a white man has, right? But sure. You, me, and Sandra all are on a right path, right? We're on a statistically probable that we're not going to end up in poverty path, right? Where we didn't have kids out of wedlock, obviously. We graduated high school, and we what was the third one? Get a job. I have a job right now, but I don't know about you or Sandra.
We're 18. That's not a thing we have to worry about right now.
But that's the thing is, you and me, we don't have to worry about it. Me and you, we all don't have to worry because we all have parents who are taking care of us. I was born with the privilege of having two parents in the house. I was born with the privilege of having a dad, which majority of Black people aren't born with. I have a dad who.
We didn't even get to that. We didn't even get to that.
That's true. But so obviously we're born into this privilege. Nothing stopped me or Sandra, even like nothing stopped us from going to college, and nothing stopped us from pursuing higher education, and nothing stopping us from on
an individual level, it's not stopping like us.
Yes,
but if you want to like address things on a societal level, it's so much more complicated than just saying, well, go to college or get a job. You have to address things. You kind of have to address things through policy. Or through better public services.
The thing you have to do. So I agree that there's economic privilege. We were born into a privilege that goes beyond the color of our skin, right? So we were born into economic. A majority of Black people aren't born into the privilege we are. So again, that could attribute to the reason. And then those Black people that the kids that are born into these families, they end up making bad decisions too, because they're statistically more likely to make bad decisions because they didn't have that figure in their household that to teach them, like, you don't have kids. Like you do studies. There was a survey done on like 100,000 Black kids and white kids, and I think they were around the age of 12, and they found that Black kids had their first sexual experience at higher rates than white kids. So like you just see that there's a trend with, and then the whole statistical fact that like Black kids are more like without a father figure, not Black kids, any kid who doesn't have a father figure is more likely to commit a crime, is more likely not to graduate high school, is more likely to end up in poverty. Is what, 10 times more likely? I don't even know what the
way we address that, I think you can agree, is with policy and not just like telling people to not leave their kids, you know?
Obviously. Well, yeah, a big factor that contributed to that was the war on poverty, which incentivized leaving your family and divorcing you pretty much get half of what you get incentives for leaving it. So again, the welfare program, which was supposed to help Black people in low-income communities, ended up severely hurting them because the single motherhood rate in the 1960s was 24%. Now it's 75%, and obviously it skyrocketed in the past 40, 50 years. And that all started when the welfare state and the Democratic Party tried funding Black families into some sort of economic prosperity.
How about we do closing statements? I don't really have like a closing statement prepared. My closing statement was supposed to be for like the decriminalizing drugs thing, but we didn't even do that. So I will just close by saying, I feel like this could have been a more productive discussion. I feel like we did like kind of go in circles a lot, but in the topics that like we didn't even plan on discussing, I think we did have some nice discussions. Like I can commend us for not like yelling at each other at all, not getting
would be yelling.
Civility politics, pretty cool. That's all I would like to say.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to have that conversation with people on opposing sides, especially people on the left, because they just don't want to have the conversation. You're actually one of the first to want to have the conversation. So it's interesting because I try to have the conversation with a lot of people and they just don't want to have it. So I think that was pretty cool. I think we did go in circles a lot, but I think there was a decent amount, a tiny amount that we did agree on.
Yeah. I mean, we ended up agreeing on the drug thing, so that was good.
I mean, yeah, the drug, I think I mean, there was no persuasion required. I think we already agreed with that on the bat. So, yeah, I think we're good.